Pucks with Haggs
is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. This is the 109th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Sign up for a premium membership. Get all of my NHL and hockey writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week, usually, for the Boston Sports Journal. Check out bostonsportsjournal.com. For all my latest, I have something up right now about Max Jones and the Bruins hoping they can get maybe a little bit more out of the former first-round pick than the Ducks did as a free agent signing that was kind of under the radar, with Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov taking up most of the conversational space on July 1. With me today, I have my longtime friend and colleague, Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work.
You can find my work weekly at bostonhockeynow.com. I do a Sunday column. I haven't posted this week's yet, but it's coming. Nick. It's coming. And then I have a blog called Rink Rap, but I'm not very active on that right now. But I'm going to revive that as well. And then I do some radio with Pete Shepard. I'm frequently here. Thank you, Joe. And got it. So I get around.
You get around, Mick, because you're a great hockey guy, and it is a pleasure to always have you on, my friend. We are going to get into some questions from fans this week. It's kind of a two-man mailbag, hag bag episode here. All right, Mick, we're going to answer some questions here, my friend. Let's just get into the first one from Roger Perry. This was on my Facebook, sent to me as a Facebook message at my Facebook fan page. Roger Perry asked, with so much turnover on the Bruins roster in each of the past several seasons, can you say which players you wish had been retained and not allowed to land with another team? Thanks.
Ooh.
Love the podcast,
Ooh.
Roger Perry. Good question, Mick. Anybody that has
Johnny
left...
Boychuk.
Who?
Johnny Boychuk.
Johnny Boychuk. All right. That one's an easy one to go back and second guess for sure. And honestly, and I don't know if I've told this story before, but we all knew covering the team at that point that the sword of Damocles was hanging over a bunch of the defensemen on that team and somebody had to go. And you thought it was going to be Boychuk because he had the most value and because he was coming up, his contract was going to be up.
And you had Dougie Hamilton coming along.
And you had Dougie Hamilton coming along. And I remember when he got traded, it was, I believe, the last preseason game before the regular season started. I think they're playing the Red Wings at the Garden, and he got traded that day. And I remember having to do TV afterwards instead of going down into Claude Julien's press conference after the game was over. So Claude gets up to the dais, gets up to the table to do the post-game press conference, sees that I'm not there, and says, where's Haggs right now? Is he somewhere crying because his boy Johnny Boychuk just got traded? And that was how he started the press conference off, because he knew that Johnny Boy and I were pretty tight. Johnny Rocket and I were pretty tight. Still are. We still send messages back and forth to each other. I love that guy. Great player, great person. Still involved with the Islanders. Got young kids that are playing hockey now. It's fun to watch him and follow his family on Instagram. But that's a guy, absolutely, you wish they hadn't traded. They got 2 second-round picks for him. And then traded away some of those picks. Basically traded the picks they got for him to get Brett Connolly. We talked about that, I think, a couple weeks ago.
You can't judge the Johnny Boychuk move on that, on the fact that Brett Connolly didn't pan out only sours it, but it doesn't judge it. It just on its own merit. I was never crazy about it because you just lost Andrew Ferentz to UFA, which was necessarily going to happen on the cap situation there. But the thing that really doubled down the pain of the Johnny Boychuk decision was when Dennis Seidenberg went down midway through the 13-14 year that they won the President's Trophy, and they never adequately replaced him. And as a result, and then it got compounded even further when Adam McQuaid went out of the lineup. And Kevin Miller was extremely raw at that point. So you had Torrey Krug, Kevin Miller, Dougie Hamilton, Matt Bartkowski, because at the end of the day, contrary to what the legacy of Claude Julien unfairly is, he preferred Matt Bartkowski to the veteran pickup at the deadline. So, that to me, you can't have entry level defensemen on all pairings and win more than one round in the playoff. I'm sorry.
And that was what's his name, Chara's Slovakian buddy, right?
Masaros.
Yeah, Andre Mazaros, who infamously Chara like really kind of panned when they asked him about it.
Oh, I was standing right in front of him. I think I was the one whose lips were moving, and Z just had nothing to say. And that told me, with the fact that they had played together in Ottawa, I'm thinking, oh boy, that's not a ringing endorsement.
No, not good.
It turned out to be, a really, that team got left at the altar. And the funniest part about that is, Chiarelli, and I'm not down on Peter Chiarelli. I think Peter Chiarelli takes way too much crap as the only general manager since Milt Schmidt to win the Stanley Cup in Boston.
Yeah, I agree.
And he said, we're all in. If you're all in, you would have traded Ryan Spooner, who at the time had clout.
2007 Hockey's championship coffee mug here.
There you go.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You had to get a credible veteran there. All he did was get a Band-Aid. At the end of the day, once McQuaid was down, every pairing had multiple entry levels. You basically were looking at Chara, Boychuk, and 4 entry level guys.
Well, but by the time it was a couple years after they'd won the cup, it was an aging group. It was a group that was having serious cap troubles. And they were trying to
winning the Stanley Cup in this era. It just does.
They were trying to Band-Aid a lot of stuff. And it got to the point. That's ultimately why Peter Chiarelli was gone, was because that's the approach they had to take towards the end to try to keep things together, because they'd overpaid for some guys to try to keep the band together a little bit, loyalty out of guys that won the cup. And I totally understand that. But like Boychuk was a guy that I felt like he was a guy that could play 82 games a year. He was a guy who was going to play hard every single night. He was a great leader. He was a guy that would block shots and do all the little things. He was a guy that was probably more offensively talented than any of the numbers he ever put up, as far as like thinking the game, the big shot that he had. Like, he was capable of doing, I think, even more than he ended up doing from an offensive standpoint at the NHL level, through big hits. Like, basically did everything you want a defenseman to do.
He was clutch goal, clutch assist, clutch fight, clutch, and so many different ways he was clutch.
And his teammates absolutely loved him too.
Well, they loved being around him. He'd go through the gates of hell for you.
I remember, I think he was hurt at the time with the Islanders, and so was McQuaid. And it was during a game where the Bruins and Islanders were playing each other. So McQuaid was up in the press box. Johnny Boychuk was up in the press box. And I just remember the two of them, like, basically were hanging out the whole game, even though there were two teams were playing each other, and talking to McQuaid afterwards about, man, we really missed that guy. Like, how much he laughed that night, like hanging out with Boychuk, and how much they had missed his presence. Yeah. And just his ability to make things light and fun through an 82-game regular season and make it interesting. And you can't put a price tag on players like that. Yeah. In a room, as far as a team goes, with like guys that bring everybody together and make it light and fun for them. So like that part of it, I can
understand why Chiarelli preferred Seidenberg to Boychuk when it came to trading one, because Seidenberg could play both sides of the ice with a plum. Yeah. And so that's a tough choice, but it was a brutal outcome.
It was. All right. So anybody recently in the last 3 or 4 years, Mick, getting back to Roger's question, under the Sweeney regime in the last handful of years.
2 years from now and say Trent Frederick?
Yeah, but you know what? I mean,
I think he's going to play for the Blues in the 25-26 season.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But like, I think he gets to a certain point where, like, yes, he's big. Yes, he's got a decent offensive abilities. Yes, he can be rough and tumble and drop the gloves and play physical every once in a while. But I don't think he does it often enough, and he doesn't play that game the way he needs to play it often enough for him to be worth like big money. He's going to get to a point soon where I think he's going to command bigger money. And they're going to have that sort of Jake. They're going to have to have that sort of Jake. They're going to have to have that sort of Jake DeBrusk, Torrey Krug conversation about, is this guy getting more expensive than he's worth given the way he plays and what he does. And he's coming to that in the next few years. And yeah, maybe he does go to St. Louis and he lights it up because he's playing in his hometown and he's playing hard every night and, playing the way the Bruins would like him to play all the time.
I'm worried that he's going to be LC Cord.
Yeah.
Or he's going to be Cam Neely.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? He's not going to be good.
He's not that good, but I mean, not a Hall of Famer, but I do feel like there's more there. And the Bruins have been expert at identifying players around the league and saying, we think there's more there. Yep. And they go and they get this guy and they underpay for them. They bring them in on a modest contract, on an opportunity, and they reveal within the context of their team, leadership, culture, chemistry, all of that good stuff, and a boatload of goaltending, and put them on a platform where the cup's half full and they thrive and they reveal the value of that player in ways that other teams couldn't do that. And to me, they got their own guy who they're not really doing that with to the degree that they would probably try to if he played for somebody else.
Yeah, maybe. Or maybe they
Maybe
know
that's
more.
Just how it works.
Maybe they know more about that player to know, that there's going to come a time where it's, they're going to have a serious conversation about him and his value versus what he's going to command as far as a contract goes. Like, I think the Bruins have been very good about, to your point, identifying players on other teams that could come in with the Bruins and flourish and do better here than they did elsewhere. Some of that is grabbing teams from bad organizations that just don't know how to develop players. Some of that is they recognize players that are going to be better in their system. But I think a lot of it just comes down to evaluating players and knowing their strengths and weaknesses and knowing who can play and who can't and who can do what. And I think they are pretty good at that with their own players too. Like, I think they generally know who they should keep, who they shouldn't, what guys' value is, what they should pay them, what they shouldn't. And I think with Frederick, there may come a time where they decide to move on from him. But to your point, it's in the next year or two, like when his next contract is up, there's going to be a tough conversation there as to how much they want to pay him to continue to move forward with him, especially if, like I said, he's not always playing the way they need him to play. I think he does it in flashes. He does it a decent amount of the time, but I don't know that he does it enough to really pay him big money.
Well, and I guess the one thing you've taken this conversation.
I still see him as a third line forward max in the league. You know what I mean? I think he maxes out as a third line guy.
About money that I didn't realize in my mind that it could go to. I'm not sure. Yeah. I have not been thinking that he's going to do what Krug did and price himself out of his ability to help the Bruins, or DeBrusk price himself out of his ability to help the Bruins. If Frederick does price himself out of his ability to help the Bruins, then I get it if they move on. But I'm hoping because I feel like they need more of his kind of player than fewer, then I would consider it a big disappointment if it doesn't work out. And I would hope that they could get him on some sort of an extension, given the fact that his growth has been kind of, I don't want to say stunted, but I want to say that it's not everything that I'd hoped for at this point. I would think that he would be a great candidate for them to say, hey, here's our own in-house opportunity to plug somebody into the top six, to complete our top six, who can do it on a plumbing sort of a identity and just. But I do think that he has a bit of a mental thing where I had a golf coach once tell me, when you think you stink, and I do think that sometimes Freddie tends to wonder if he's doing the right thing more than just go out and play the damn game. Play it hard, pedal to the metal, let's go, and stop worrying about whether you're doing the right thing or not. And I think that his growth would be faster, even if there's more errors, there's more mistakes that way. But when they put him in Monty says he's a wing, not a center. And if that's the case, then go at it. Then go ahead and make your mistakes. You're not going to kill. You're not going to hurt the team by playing hard and making a few mistakes. You're not. Winger can afford that kind of growth pattern way more than a defenseman or a center.
Yeah, we're err on the side of being aggressive offensively and
Absolutely.
even cheating a little that time.
Please err on the side of being aggressive if you're playing wing. And I now suspect it's starting to hit me. The blade's starting to finally twinkle, starting to flicker. That this is a Frank Vetrano question, and I don't disagree with the Bruins moving on from Frank to Tank. I feel like he would have tanked here. I don't feel like he would have undergone the pissed off growth that he went through in his game to whip his body into better shape. And some of that's the natural progression. A lot of guys need several years in their 20s in order to become the more professionalized version of themselves, a little lighter on their feet. He still can snap the puck with the best of them. He knows he's got the experience now in the league to understand how to play the game the nasty way that best suits his style and what he brings to the table and why he's an effective player. Sure, a lot of people look at him now and said, love to see him on the Bruins. Well, you know what? I'm not sure he'd be that player if he didn't go through what he went through.
Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time, the Red Sox, Fenway Park. Jarren Duran putting on a show at the MLB All-Star Game. So you may want to dig into your pocket and actually spend some money on some Red Sox tickets based on Jarren Duran and the season he's having. This is one of those seasons where I think you're going to want to watch because he's in the middle of putting something together pretty special. You're going to say you were in the stands and you saw Jarren Duran do something crazy when you were actually watching one of the games at Fenway. So go to Game Time. Last minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Zone deals, save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of getting Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, create the account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. No, I agree. And I don't view Vetrano as one of those guys that got away or whatever, that you regret letting go. I think you're right. He's been a good player. He obviously became, an all-star player for the Ducks, I think it was last year. And that's great for him, great for his family. And he could put the puck in the net. There's no question he can shoot the puck. So any team could use that. And there's been times when the Bruins could use that finishing ability, but he doesn't come to mind. The guy that comes to mind for me is in the last name I'm blanking on right now.
Hamilton?
Ryan from the New York Rangers, the defenseman that they traded. Ryan Lindgren that they traded in the Rick Nash deal.
Yeah,
that's a guy I think they regret trading. I think they could have used that player. Given, and hindsight is 2020. They didn't know
Rick Nash. He went in the Rick Nash deal, right?
Yes. They didn't know that Rick Nash was going to,
getting a concussion
have to retire early.
Yeah.
They didn't know what Ryan Lindgren was going to turn into at the time. There was,
I watched him in the World Juniors, and I recall thinking that Lindgren didn't quite have NHL speed. And right. I turned out to be quite wrong about that.
But Mick, those guys are always the sort of gritty, physical, hard-nosed kind of players like that, especially the defensemen and stay-at-home defensemen to a degree. Those guys are always going to be difficult to gauge whether they're going to be able to make it in the NHL or they're not until they get there. So, I'm not crucifying the Bruins for making the trade. That's the player they had to deal. I remember Don Sweeney, I was in Buffalo when he made the trade, when he talked to us about it afterwards, and he was really down on trading Lindgren. You could tell he did not want to give Lindgren up, but he had to do it in order to make the deal. And you could tell he was giving up something that he valued quite a bit. But what he's turned into with the Rangers, a guy that plays with a burr in his saddle, a guy that's got an attitude that smacks you in the face, a guy that's physical, a really competitive guy, just a winning hockey player on the back end. Kind of what they've missed a little bit on their back end, those kind of players, and at least having one of those kind of guys that was just an a-hole to the other team when he was playing against them. And that's the guy I look at around the league and say, wow, it'd be nice if the Bruins could have kept him. He would have been a valuable player here. And Bruins fans would have loved him too, by the way.
My asterisk on that entire situation is always going to be that they got the wrong guy. And it isn't about Nash's concussion or his career ending. It was about what they needed so desperately was a bridge defenseman between Chara and McAvoy, and that was Ryan McDonough, because the Rangers simultaneously unloaded him, and who gets him? Tampa Bay. And what did they do? I mean, that completed the big three in front of Vasilevsky, and they never looked back. To me, that was the guy the Bruins needed, not Nash.
All right. That was a good question, Roger. Thanks. Keep sending questions like that. Those are good to have us go through, run the gamut of Bruins history from Johnny Boychuk to Ryan Lindgren and Ryan McDonough.
He might be still thinking about our third and fourth line centerman too. Going out. You've got Corrali's been gone. You've had Riley Nash has been gone, and who's the left shot center from Europe that they had a couple of years ago?
Joachim Nordstrom.
No, he was a winger.
He played center too, though. I think a little bit. Not Par Lindholm.
No. Tall, good face-off, left shot, hard-nosed player.
Nosek?
Huh? Yeah.
Nosek?
Yep.
He's fine. I mean, like all the players you're mentioning, though, Mick, what did they really do after they left? And that's my point. Is like, I think the Bruins do a good job of bringing guys in, getting good years out of them, and then sort of moving on from them when the price gets too high. Like they're good at that.
It's been the only way to manage the cap. It's been the only way they could manage the cap is to not keep those guys, but continue farming them up. And they've produced a lot of fourth liners for a lot of teams in the league.
Yep, short money, short term. You get them for a couple of really good years, and then you move on. Which is more likely? Patra plus Lowry plus Lysell plus 2025 first round pick equals Leon Draisaitl, or Brandon Bussey and Oscar Jelvik equals Rutger McGroarty from the Winnipeg Jets, former first round pick that did really well with Team USA at the World Juniors, and is said to be like not on the same page with the Winnipeg Jets, so they may be looking to trade him. I don't think Leon Draisaitl is likely at all. Certainly not for that package. Patra, Lowry, Lysell, and a 2025 first for Draisaitl. I don't think that's going to get it done. Like the Bruins,
there's 12 teams in the league that'll blow that away.
What you would have to give up some kind of significant player at the NHL level to get him.
And you got to look at what do they miss? Look at their team and say, what do they need? They don't need two dimes and a nickel. They need certain things to add to their team. They did make it hurt.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Like a Bruins team that does not have even if I think their prospect pool is better than they're ranked by the Athletic or all the draftnik guru, prospect guru people out there, even if I think their prospects are better than they consistently get ranked by those kind of people, around the league, it's not highly thought of as some of the other teams, and they don't have like the super high end like star type prospects in their system right now. So you're not going to get a Leon Draisaitl for what they have for prospects, not including a blue chip NHL player. And, oh, by the way, your team is good, so you're constantly picking at the end of the first round. So your first round picks aren't even as highly valuable as some other teams would be as well. You look at all those combinations and all those factors together, the Bruins are not going to be in the market for Leon Draisaitl. They're just not, because they do not have the pieces to get that kind of deal done. They're not even close to having enough to get a Leon Draisaitl done with what they had right now. The only way it would happen is if they like started talking about trading David Pastrnak or something like that.
Right. That's right.
That's the only way the wheels start moving.
That's the only way that kind of stuff happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just don't see that happen. Man, can you imagine McDavid and Pastrnak playing together? That would be
must-see TV.
It certainly would. It would be interesting. But Rutger McGroarty, I don't think Bussey and Jelvik does it. Like, no.
Bussey, you can't talk about like that yet because we haven't seen anything in the NHL, and he's already well into his mid-20s. He's a late bloomer. It'd be great if it works out, but he doesn't have value right now.
You would have to give up a first-round pick to replace the first-round pick they used on McGroarty to pick him, and now that he's not going to sign with him. That would be the starting point, and it would be more than that. It would be a first-round pick and a prospect of some kind, or a first-round pick and somebody from the NHL roster, not a star player, but somebody that the Jets could use at the NHL level. But I will say this, Mick. I think the chance of a guy like McGroarty coming to the Bruins is much better than a player like Leon Draisaitl. And I could see that kind of deal happening. We've seen the Bruins jump on these kind of players before, players that were picked by other teams, didn't want to sign with them. They value them. They know they're good players. It's a good young player you could lock up for a while, and they could bring him into the system. You know, when they were looking for a center before they signed Lindholm, before July 1st, I thought of him as like, that's an interesting guy. If you're looking for a center type player, a forward type player to come in, that's a young guy that you can kind of project, and maybe he improves as things go along here. If you wanted to, like, you know, invest in a young player instead of an established one that you're going to have to pay a ton of money. So, like, I could see there being interest in him and something like that potentially happening.
Interesting.
But you'd have to give up more than Bussy and Jelvik.
Well, that's the other thing is Jelvik is a terrific player to watch in a college game, and he's probably going to be a pretty good pro. But
yeah, he was good. He was the best player, I thought, at development camp. Like, as far as the Bruins prospects go, most noticeable for sure.
Right, I can see that. His game has professional polish already. BC uses him on the power play to be the brains of the operation off the half wall. I mean, he has a lot there to like. The question is whether it can translate at his speed, strength, size level to play that role effectively in the NHL. Can he be a good NHL player? Can he be an impactful NHL player is what I really mean. And that's the question to a guy like Jelvik. You don't know it until you bring him in and see him play in the AHL and see how it goes and see if he comes up. And you know, he might be who you don't see him till he's 25 years old, but he might be pretty good. You know, his 25 to 35 might be excellent. You just don't know. So sometimes you get great all-around players and without any
definitely
guarantee
not.
To, you know, translate.
Yeah, interesting question. But the bottom line is, like, the Bruins, unless they're trading Pastrnak, Draisaitl's not going to be coming to Boston, and that would be a significant move that I don't they're not going to make. Like, they've invested in the David Pastrnak business for the long term. Like, he's their guy. Like, and why would you? What? I don't think there's obviously, like, pros and cons to David Pasternak's game. Like, there's always going to be things you can look at because he's a creative player. He's a risk taker. He does things with the puck where sometimes it's going to turn into a turnover instead of a fantastic offensive play. And he continues to, I think, figure out, like, the ways to be a big factor in the playoffs like he is during the regular season. And, you know, that was a big moment for him, that Game 7 play against Toronto in overtime for sure. But, like, one of the most exciting, if not the most exciting players in the NHL, one of the most charismatic players in the NHL, if not the most charismatic player in the NHL, huge numbers, going to go down as arguably the best goal scorer in Bruins history, certainly one of the top 2 or 3. You know, he and Espo will have to duke it out probably at the end of the day.
I think Pasta had that great season, but I don't see him in that context. It's more like a playmaking scorer, do it all from the wing kind of player who is more going to be like is sort of more like Rick Middleton, closer to Rick Middleton on steroids than Phil Esposito.
They're not similar players. I'm just talking about being pure goal scorers. Like, he's a pure goal scorer. He
makes his shot. I remember Bob Ryan wrote about Paul Pierce and said that he's like the greatest offensive player in Celtics history or something like that. And people are like, how could you say that? Blah, blah, blah. Well, because the basis of him saying was because Pierce had more ways to score than any other player in Celtics history. He had more ways to do it. And Pasta, a little like Adam Oates, but better skater, invents hockey, a little like Mark Savard, better skater, invents hockey all the way up the ice. He doesn't do anything the same season to season. Sometimes he doesn't do anything the same month to month. He just keeps on. His brain never stops churning out new ways of deceiving opponents and faking pass by swinging his stick around his body like 45 degrees, but you don't know where the release point is. It might be hard to the corner. It might be a cross. It might be a shot on the net. He just has a million ways to score that he hasn't even decided on yet. He kind of does them.
Yeah, I mean, he's always going to have the one-timer from the point as his bread and butter, from the face-off dot as his bread and butter, and the face-off circle.
Unfortunately,
like
that play's not going away.
That's
everybody loves it.
That is always going to be there. And I think when people think about him and sort of his trademark like thing that he does to score goals, that's going to be it. And that's something he's worked on a lot and has honed from the time he came into the league from where he is now. But to your point, like every year we watch him and he's doing something different out there. Like he's worked on or he's thought of creative ways to score and, different things to outthink the defense. Classic offensive hockey player where he's using deception and creativity.
Yeah. When he first came up and he played a little more like Pavel Bure, but then I realized he's not nearly as fast as Pavel Bure, but
no,
what he can do is be some sort of like Pavel Bure and Jaromir Jagr had a baby. And it's David Pastrnak because he's a combination. It's kind of like this hybrid version of a guy whose game somewhat is protect the puck, be good in traffic, stick handle in a phone booth, but then also use your speed intelligently to gain separation where your legs might not give it to you in a race at the All-Star game. And in that way, he's a genius. So my bigger problems with the whole pasta question and team building exercise goes back to the idea of your highest paid player is a winger. Really? It's not my number one defenseman. It's not my number one center.
Nope.
So, that's that when you're like that and then you say, okay, there's only so much I can invest in these other spots. It's, good for them that they're as good as they are in these other places now.
And why is Pastrnak your highest paid player, Mick?
Why is he?
Because scoring goals is the most difficult thing to do in hockey and in the NHL. And it's always going to be. And I understand like you build around other players, but like scoring goals, putting the puck in the net is the absolute hardest thing to do in the NHL and in hockey. And those guys should get paid the most. I know what you're saying. Like you want to build strength down the middle, centers, like defense, goaltending, like all that.
To me, it's like, what do I need to contend for the Stanley Cup on a regular basis? In and year out, what do I need? I need strength down the middle. So help me, Harry Sinden. If the Bruins teams that got close in all of Harry Sinden's years and fell short, it was because they didn't have that one more 30-goal stick on the wing. That's where they fell short. However, if he ever made sure they had that and that they, at the expense of those down the middle positions, they wouldn't have been close.
And they wouldn't have won in 2011 if they didn't build that way.
That's what they
were.
They
were built straight down the middle. David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Tim Thomas. Like that was a classic strength down the middle, no question about it. But like I have no qualms with Pastrnak being the highest paid player on the team when he like I said, at the end of the day, he's probably going to have the most goals in Bruins franchise history. He's going to be known, I think, as the most prolific goal scorer in Bruins history. Like I think he has a lot of more different ways to score than Espo did. I think Espo's game was built in a different way, even though he was a great goal scorer.
Espo is one of the greatest puck protectors of all time. He was up there with Jagr and Daniel Alfredsson. He could shield the puck from people and carry it. He was a warrior. He could take a beating in the slot, and he could thread a needle from those positions. Just incredible. And Harry Sinden taught him how to play the slot. He turned the Bruins. Harry Sinden, when after Milt Schmidt made that trade, Harry Sinden turned the Bruins into a table hockey team where the wingers and the corners are doing the pivoting and the circling, and the centers in the middle jamming the puck down the slot, down through the middle. And that's really how the Bruins top line played the game. Yeah.
Table hockey.
They were the table hockey.
Bubble hockey. Yes. Yeah. That's classic bubble hockey strategy right there, Mick. Classic USA Russia bubble hockey strategy right there. All right. It comes down to Swayman wanting to win a cup. Give Swayman a huge contract and we don't win the cup because of because of an incomplete top six. Or give Swayman a team-friendly deal so we can get another top six forward and we win the cup. Here's the third option. We own Swayman's rights, trade him for a top six forward, and with our remaining cap space, get another top six forward and win the cup. and that is from bbruins88 on Twitter/X. No, they're not going to trade Jeremy Swayman. That's not happening. Not for a top 6 forward. I don't think they're going to have enough left over based on the salary cap space that they have right now to get another top 6 forward. Like maybe they would have had enough to get a guy like Daniel Sprong if they had been able to, get something done with Swayman and then move on to the next thing and bring in another sort of hired gun, especially if you can get a guy like Sprong that's a pretty good offensive player for under $1 million. But like Jeremy Swayman is going to get signed. It's going to be to probably between $7 and $8 million a year for a long-term contract. They're not going to have enough for a top 6 winger unless it's somebody like Sprong that's going to sign for like very short money. And clearly they're not going to sign that kind of player until they have cost certainty with Jeremy Swayman and they get that contract done. That's just not good business. They have to, know what his number is going to be before they bring in anybody else. Well, do you think it was
a mistake then to backload the way they did with so many small contracts and fortify their bottom 6 the way they did in order to leave room for a guy who might have that kind of sneaky potential to replace DeBrusk? Yeah.
You're talking about Sprong? No. Because I think there's other guys out there. I wrote an article this week for Boston Sports Journal, and Sprong was at the top of the list. But there was a good 7 or 8 guys that they could be camp invites. Some were better fits than others. Kailer Yamamoto is, I think, an interesting one that they could bring in and just like on a flyer and take a look at. He's scored 20 goals in the league before. He was a former first-round pick. He's small, but he's skilled and feisty winger. Like, he'd be an interesting guy to look at. I put a few other guys in there. JVR is obviously still out there. I don't think he's coming back. Blake Wheeler is a guy that hasn't retired. He's out there. You could potentially bring him in for a look.
Scratched him.
There's a lot of different. Yeah. Well, he was hurt too. Like, he was just coming back from that injury. So, but like, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at guys that none of them are going to be like, this guy's going to come in and be Jake DeBrusk.
There's one other little scenario here. Let's just say the Bruins are having a year. Let's just say that they play to their identity and now they're newly fortified down the middle of the rink and they're that much better and they're winning the division and they're really looking like a cup contender. Things happen during the season. There's LTIR. So there's going to be possibilities that right now may not, be, and I'm, just to let anybody know who's listening, my asking of the Sprong question is really not because I prefer that scenario. It's because I just wanted to hear your thoughts on what Sweeney did with some of the size that he has, that he denies is size related. But to me, that's an irrelevant point right now.
Yeah.
The point is they're bigger.
I'm okay. I'm 100% okay, Mick, with them starting the season and going through the carousel, trying Trent Frederick with Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand, trying Morgan Geekie there, trying Justin Brazeau there, trying Fabian Lysell there, trying Merkelov there, bringing in 1 or 2 training camp invites and giving them looks in camp like they did with Danton Heinen and Alex Chasen last year when they were battling it out for that last roster spot. And I think they're going to do that. They'll probably bring in a couple of guys out like that are established NHL players that maybe one of them pops and can perform for you. I'm totally okay with them doing that for the first few months of the season, seeing if anybody really meshes well with them, seeing if anybody has elevated their game and can consistently play with those 2 players. And then if not, you make a deal at the deadline. Maybe you have, like you're mentioning, some cap space because of LTIR. Maybe you trade away some cap space in order to make it happen. Like they're creative with that, so I think they'll have enough cap space and money to make a deal. And I think if they need a top 6 winger and if they need more offense, that is something they're absolutely going to be able to go out and get at the deadline if they have to have it.
Yeah, I think so too. And who knows? Maybe they'll trade a player. You never know. You never know how things are going to shake out once the lines are the way they are. And if they're flying and they're looking good, somebody might be wearing a bullseye. You just never know how things are going to pan out. So
it is funny though, Mick. Like we talk now, like these are established lines, right? Like, it's going to be Zacha, Lindholm, Pastrnak. It's going to be Charlie Coyle, Brad Marchand, and they're going to be looking for another right wing. we've watched Jim Montgomery for the last 2 years, right? We know what happens. Then those guys are going to get moved all around. They're going to play with each other. Like, he's going to juggle the lines quite a bit. Like, it's not like it was with Bruce Cassidy, where he had pretty established lines, or Claude, and he kind of kept them together and didn't move them a lot. Jim Montgomery's consistently is being, in having inconsistent lines because he changes.
And Patra could be penciled into C3.
Yeah.
However, what if it turns out that he's having a sophomore slump as a pro? What if it turns out that he, and he's going to be eligible for AHL? What, isn't he going to this coming season? They could send him. Yeah. So
Patra, yes.
That might wind up being a great place for him for a half a season. If he's not really hitting the ground running when it starts, it's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm not banking on him being an NHL player right out of training camp again like last year. I think AHL time would be good for him.
So unless he's knocking the door down saying, you got to keep me on this team, maybe that's how it starts. And if it does, then what happens to Zacha? What happens to Geekie? And then how does that? So you're right. There's so many different ways that this thing could go, that you could wind up with a million things here. So the idea that these Ducks have to be in an exact row, what team has ever gone soup to nuts the whole season since like the 72 Bruins? Right. I mean, here's our top 9 and it's not going to change all year long.
Right. And that's just like, whether it's because of the makeup of the players or whether it was anything else, it's also going to be because Jim Montgomery likes to tinker with his lines, and he likes to move them around, and he likes to try different players together. And I get it. Like, he's coaching, and he also wants everybody to be comfortable playing with everybody else and have chemistry with everybody else. So when they get to the playoffs, if he starts moving people around and putting them different places, they can function together. And that's just, you
could have a late season injury, and then you get fish out of water if you're not preparing for that.
Yep. All right. This is from Bobby Rotundo on Twitter. I think Sweeney should be more concerned about signing Swayman. Who knows? Who says Sweeney is not concerned about signing Swayman? I'm sure that is the number one concern for Don Sweeney right now. But he says, I just can't get over they traded Ullmark without clarity of reaching an agreement with Swayman. And, look, on its face, you can be critical of the Bruins for trading Ullmark when they did without having, the bird in hand of Jeremy Swayman having signed a contract. Because it really does take a lot of the leverage, a lot of the power away from the Bruins, and they're on faith that Swayman's going to sign a contract after trading his partner, the other guy that would, could effectively replace him, trading him to Ottawa and bringing in a guy, Korpisalo, they do not project to be his replacement or to be a guy that could play at that level, and having another guy, Brandon Bussia, that's a rookie. So you could criticize him a little bit because they didn't make the right cold hard business move, keeping Ullmark, but they had to trade Ullmark. He wasn't going to be on the team, and they had to do it then to get good value and to get the first-round pick and to get the player they wanted in the draft. And, at the end of the day, things are going to get done with Swayman. It's going to be somewhere in the $7 to $8 million range, I think, no matter what happens.
Let's face it, the parameters laid out by the Swayman camp and laid out by the Bruins were probably well established before they traded Ullmark. So what agent is going to take an emerging star and change his entire approach because they traded the other number one goalie? I mean, that's just supposed to say, we're giving you what you wanted. We're giving you the net. We're coming here in peace. That should be an ambassadorial move. That should be diplomacy, taken as diplomacy. That should not be taken as, you've weakened yourself. Now we're going to really turn the screw. Who would you do that? What team would ever want to negotiate with his players? That would be bad.
Now we're going to get our ultimate revenge for you saying not nice things about Jeremy Swayman in arbitration last year. That's it.
It would be now. If it's one thing to say, look, they're in a situation in their privacy. They may say, look, they're in a situation where they've traded Ullmark here. We don't have to back down. That's different from saying we're going to revise our offer, our ask, because we now know that you're in a position where you're hogtied yourself. This is not a knife fight in an alley. This is definitely a negotiation, and as such, the whole league watches what happens in cases like this. They're all taking notes.
Yep. Yes, I agree. If it's a 7-8 year deal, I think it's going to be very low sevens. That's my prediction. If it's a shorter term deal, that's going to be interesting, like, because they're buying up less free agent years. It could be even lower than that. I still continue to say there is no comparable out there to Jeremy Swayman where he is in his career that's getting paid like high sevens or in the eights or anything like that. I don't see any way 8 years, 64 happens, just because there's no other goalie out there that's gotten anywhere close to that with the body of work that he has. There's just no comparable, and that's how negotiations work. That's how these contracts get done.
And how much do you think it factors in the whole considerations of, well, how many years do I get the no movement? How many years do I get the modified no trade?
Yeah, all that.
I figure, I mean, there's an awful lot here for them to. And what happens if the NHL goes on lockout? What happens if now a lot of that might already be established by the CBA, that what happens in cases like this. But there's just a lot of ground to cover when you're talking about a career contract like this.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And so it'll get done. I still think, it's going to get done at some point. It may spill over. Like the bigger ones seem to sometimes it takes a day or two into camp to get done. But I would suspect it's not going to be something that's going to carry over to the point where it's going to hurt Swayman. And he's been around Boston. He's been working out at Warrior, and he's going to be fine. It's not like he's off somewhere, not working out.
I'm glad that the NHL's in a partnership era with the union where they can do this. And here he is without a contract, and he's working out in their facilities, and as though he's a signed player. Yeah. That partnership is so important to the NHL thriving, in my opinion, and not the adversarial foundations.
No doubt. All right, Mick, thank you very much. I appreciate the time this week and the knowledge.